Monique Holloway, don't move right there.
I have to tell you everything before I lose nerve. It started with one invoice. I told myself I would stop.
Monique Denise Holloway operated without oversight for 4 years as a 911 shift supervisor in Fulton, Ohio. An entire county depended on the emergency fund she controlled. Not one person checked.
A mailbox, that's all it was. 4 years of invoices and the whole company is a numbered box in a shipping store.
She would not be allowed to finish that sentence. Within 96 hours, investigators from the Ohio Auditor of State's Special Investigations Unit would seize her work computer, the purchasing card she had carried for 9 years, and a battered green ledger she kept locked in the bottom drawer of her supervisor's desk. $250,000. 4 years. One fictitious vendor whose entire physical existence was a numbered metal mailbox in a strip mall shipping store on Route 22. The fund she had drained was the fund Fulton County had built for the worst day it would ever see. Before we get into the rest of this one, I want to ask you something. Have you ever worked somewhere that ran on the honor system, where one person's signature was the only check on a whole pile of money? Drop a yes or a no in the comments and tell me what kind of place it was. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. This channel covers the cases the local news buries on page 7, and the one you're about to hear is exactly that kind of case. Monique Denise Holloway was born in March of 1973 in Fulton, Ohio, a county seat of about 31,000 people set along the river bend 2 hours northeast of Dayton. Her father, Marcus Holloway, was a maintenance supervisor at the Fulton Municipal Water Plant. Her mother, Yvonne Holloway, worked the front desk at the county clerk's office on Main Street, a job she would keep for 34 years. Monique was the middle of 3 children. The family lived in a 2-story house on Eldridge Street with a chain-link fence and a screened porch her father had built himself in the summer of 1981. She grew up listening to a scanner. Her father kept one on the kitchen counter, tuned to county fire and the sheriff's frequency. The volume turned low while the family ate dinner. Other kids fell asleep to the radio. Monique fell asleep to 10 codes and dispatcher voices reading off addresses she would later memorize without trying. When the tornado sirens went off in April of 1987, she was 14, and she would tell investigators years later that she remembered the dispatcher on the scanner that night more clearly than she remembered her own teacher's voice. She graduated from Fulton Central High School in 1991. Her senior yearbook listed 3 activities: marching band, the Future Public Servants Club, and a part-time job at the Riverside Diner, working 3rd shift on weekends for $3.35 an hour. Her senior quote, copied from a poster her mother kept above the kitchen phone, read, "Show up, stay calm, help where you can." She enrolled at Columbus State Community College that fall and earned an associate's degree in criminal justice in May of 1993. She came home, married a man named Reginald Curtis in October of that same year, and took a job at a Cincinnati-based answering service that handled overnight calls for doctors' offices and small-town funeral homes. The pay was $7.10 an hour. She worked the 11 to 7 shift and slept during the day in a 1-bedroom apartment on the 2nd floor of a converted Victorian. Her daughter Aaliyah was born in 1996. The marriage ended in 1999, quietly, without lawyers. Reginald moved to Indianapolis. Monique moved back to Fulton and took a job she had been chasing since she was 16. On February 7, 2000, she was hired as a probationary telecommunicator at the Fulton County Emergency Operations Center. Her starting salary that first year was $26,400. Her training file from that period survived in the personnel records the auditors would later subpoena. Her trainer, a senior dispatcher named Eileen Marsh, wrote that Monique was remarkably composed under load, that she memorized the call routing matrix in 11 days, and that she treated every caller, even repeat nuisance callers, with patience that the rest of the floor noticed. Within 2 years, she was off probation. Within 5, she was a senior dispatcher running the night console alone. Within 8, she was being floated to fill in for shift supervisors during vacation weeks. In May of 2011, she was promoted to permanent shift supervisor, the position she would hold until the day her keycard was deactivated. Her promotion letter, signed by the then Director of Emergency Services, called her the most reliable supervisory candidate the center has produced in a decade. The letter is now an exhibit in the state's sentencing memorandum. The same office that issued it would, in 2025, issue the press release announcing her arrest. To understand what Monique Holloway did, you have to understand what the Fulton County Emergency Operations Center actually is and how it is paid for. The center sits on the second floor of the County Public Safety Building on West Liberty Street. It is a single long room with 10 dispatch consoles arranged in 2 rows of 5, a glass-walled supervisor's office at the back, a small kitchen with a coffee maker that has been there since 2003, and a storage closet the size of a single-car garage. 24 hours a day, 3 shifts a day, the center handles every 911 call that originates inside Fulton County: medical, fire, sheriff, the 3 municipal police departments, the county hazmat team, and the volunteer search and rescue unit that operates out of the southern townships. The center's annual operating budget is funded primarily through a 911 surcharge added to every landline and wireless bill in the county. That money pays salaries, equipment leases, and routine supplies. It is audited annually and watched closely. But there is a second, much smaller account. It exists in nearly every emergency operations center in America in some form. In Fulton County, it is called the Emergency Operations Discretionary Fund, and on the day Monique Holloway was promoted to supervisor, it held roughly $480,000. It is funded by a portion of the surcharge plus occasional federal disaster preparedness grants, and it exists for one specific purpose. When something happens that the regular budget cannot wait to address, when an ice storm takes down 3 towers at 3 in the morning, when a tanker rolls on Route 22, and the responders need additional radios on scene by sunrise, when the regional hospital calls and says it needs the county's portable repeaters now, the fund pays for it immediately. No purchase order, no 3 competing bids, 1 supervisor signature, 1 invoice, money out the door. The threshold for a single supervisor's signature was $25,000. Anything above that required the county administrator to co-sign. The fund was reconciled quarterly. The reconciliation was performed by whichever shift supervisor had been designated the fund administrator for the year. From 2014 forward, that supervisor was Monique Holloway. The trust placed in that single signature is the entire architecture of the system. A county the size of Fulton cannot afford to staff a full procurement department around a fund that might sit untouched for months at a time and then need to spend $40,000 in 3 hours during a flood. So the county trusted the supervisor. It had always trusted the supervisor. For 71 years, since the fund was created in 1953 after a tornado leveled 2 townships and the county discovered it had no mechanism to buy emergency supplies fast enough, no fund administrator had ever been accused of stealing from it. The first fictitious invoice from Lakeside Comm Solutions was approved on October 12, 2020. The amount was $4,840. The line item read, "Emergency replacement of 3 portable VHF handheld radios, expedited shipping, batteries, and chargers." There were no radios. There was no shipping. There was no Lakeside Comm Solutions in any meaningful sense of the phrase. There was a P.O. box at a place called the Pack and Ship on West Liberty Street, 4 blocks from the Public Safety Building. Monique Holloway had rented it on September 28th, paying in cash for a 6-month lease, listing the box holder as Lakeside Comm Solutions, LLC, and providing a business address that was simply the address of the shipping store itself, suite number 218, which corresponded to the metal mailbox. Investigators would later find no business filing for Lakeside Comm Solutions with the Ohio Secretary of State. No tax identification number, no banking record under that name. The $4,840 had been wired to an account at a credit union in Mansfield, Ohio, registered as a sole proprietorship under the name M.D. Curtis. Curtis was Monique's married name from her brief marriage in the 1990s. She had reopened the account on September 30th, 2 days after renting the mailbox, using a driver's license that still carried that name and an address that had been her mother's house since 1977. The first invoice sat untouched in the bank account for 11 weeks. Investigators believe she was waiting to see if anyone would notice. No one did. The quarterly reconciliation was performed by Monique herself in January 2021. Lakeside Comm Solutions appeared on the vendor list as a line item, was checked off as paid and reconciled, and the report was signed and filed. In March 2021, the second invoice was processed, $7,200 for field charger units and antenna replacements. In May, $11,100 for tactical channel programming and consultation services. By the end of 2021, she had moved $61,000 through the mailbox. The scheme expanded along a second track in 2022. The county's real radio vendor, a legitimate company based in Toledo, sent quarterly maintenance invoices. Monique began intercepting these and rewriting them before submission. A genuine invoice for $3,400 would be altered to read $3,900. The county paid the inflated amount. The vendor was paid the original amount. The difference, $500 at a time, went into a second account. 203 altered invoices have been documented across 38 months. The padded amount averaged $420 per invoice. The total diverted through invoice padding came to roughly $85,000. The third track was the purchasing card. The fund carried a single county-issued card with a $15,000 monthly limit, reserved for emergencies that did not allow time for a wire transfer. Monique used it to book a 4-night stay at a beachfront hotel in Hilton Head, South Carolina in March 2022, coded as Regional Emergency Communications Conference attendance. She used it for a rental car in Nashville in October 2022, coded as Site Survey for Mutual Aid Agreement. She used it for a stay at a resort in Sedona, Arizona in February 2023, coded as Continuing Education, NINA Standards Review. The conferences existed. She did not attend any of them. The total personal travel charges across 4 years came to roughly $22,000. The remaining draw, about $82,000, came from a pattern of small lakeside invoices submitted on a near-monthly schedule from mid-2022 onward, never large enough to trigger the $25,000 co-signature requirement, never patterned enough to suggest a system, always reconciled quarterly by the same hand that had approved them. She told her co-workers, when they asked about the new car in late 2022, that her mother had died and left her a small inheritance. Her mother, in fact, was alive and still living on Eldridge Street, and her co-workers, none of whom knew Yvonne Holloway personally, had no reason to check. In January of 2024, Fulton County hired a new finance director. Her name was Patricia Bowen. She was 46, came from a previous post at the auditor's office in Stark County, and she had a habit her predecessor had not. She read vendor files in full. Her predecessor, retired now, had handled the county's vendor master file the way most county finance directors do. He checked that invoices matched purchase orders, that totals reconciled, and that the vendor's tax identification number was on file. He did not, as a matter of routine, verify whether the vendors actually existed. Patricia Bowen did. In April of 2024, Bowen began what she would later describe in a deposition as a baseline cleanup of the county's vendor list. The list contained 271 active vendors. She picked the bottom 40 by transaction volume and ran each of them through the Ohio Secretary of State's business search, the IRS's tax-exempt verification system where applicable, and a basic web search for a physical address and a phone number. Lakeside Comm Solutions returned nothing. No Secretary of State filing. No tax identification record matching the EIN on the W-9 the county had on file. The W-9 itself, Bowen noticed, had been signed by someone identified only as M. Curtis, owner, with a signature that was illegible. The business address resolved via a simple Google Street View pull to a strip mall shipping store. Bowen did not raise the alarm immediately. She drove to the shipping store herself on a Tuesday afternoon in May 2024. She parked across the street. She walked in, asked the clerk whether Lakeside Comm Solutions had an office on the premises, and was told that no, Suite 218 was a mailbox. The rental was paid in cash by a woman who came in once or twice a month to collect mail, and the clerk did not know her name. Bowen drove back to the county building. She pulled every lakeside invoice the county had ever paid. There were 47 of them. Every single one had been approved by Monique Holloway. Every single one had been reconciled by Monique Holloway. Every single one had been wired to a credit union account in Mansfield she had never heard of. She did not call Monique. She called the Ohio Auditor of State's office in Columbus and asked for a forensic accountant. We are about to walk into the part of this case where it stops being a paperwork problem and becomes a criminal investigation. If you've made it this far, subscribe before you forget. We cover one of these every week, and the one in the corner of your screen right now is the case that made me start this channel in the first place. The forensic accountant assigned to the case was a man named Garrett Whitlock, an 11-year veteran of the Auditor of State's Special Investigations Unit. He worked from a desk in Columbus and traveled to Fulton 4 times across the summer of 2024. He did not introduce himself to Monique Holloway. Whitlock's first task was to map the discretionary funds outflows for the prior 6 years. He pulled bank records under subpoena, cross-referenced them with the county's general ledger, and built a spreadsheet of every disbursement from the fund between January 2018 and June 2024. The spreadsheet ran to 2,411 line items. He sorted by vendor. Lakeside Comm Solutions appeared 104 times. The earliest entry was October 12, 2020. The latest was June 4, 2024, 8 weeks before Whitlock pulled the records. The total Lakeside billing across that period was $146,700. Every entry had been approved by Holloway. Every entry had been reconciled by Holloway. No physical equipment from Lakeside had ever been logged into the center's equipment room, which kept an asset inventory tagged and signed by a separate technician. The padded invoices took longer to find. Whitlock pulled the legitimate Toledo vendor's records directly from the vendor under a separate subpoena and compared every invoice the vendor had sent against every invoice the county had paid. The discrepancy pattern emerged in the second week of September 2024. 203 altered invoices, $85,000. The purchasing card was the easiest to document. The card statements were on file. The hotel charges in Hilton Head, Nashville, and Sedona had been logged as conference attendance. Whitlock called each of the 3 conferences. None of them had any record of Monique Holloway registering, attending, or being invoiced for materials. In October 2024, Whitlock obtained a search warrant for the credit union account in Mansfield. The account had a balance of $11,400 at the time of seizure. Across 4 years, it had received 294 wire transfers, totaling $243,000, every one of them traceable to the Fulton County Emergency Operations Discretionary Fund. The outflows from the account included payments to a car dealership in Mansfield for a 2022 Lincoln Nautilus, 3 monthly payments to a contractor who had installed a new kitchen at Monique's home on Eldridge Street, and a recurring transfer to a personal checking account at a different bank in her own legal name. The smoking gun was not any of this. It was a photograph. On a cold morning in November 2024, an investigator from the auditor's office drove to the Pack and Ship on West Liberty Street, walked to the bank of mailboxes along the back wall, and photographed mailbox number 218. A small numbered metal door, no bigger than a sheet of paper, set in a row of identical doors. That photograph was attached to the indictment as Exhibit A. Beneath it, the caption read, "Headquarters of the vendor that billed Fulton County $243,000. The text messages on Monique's personal phone, recovered by warrant in December, were the other piece. 3 of them, sent to a sister who had been receiving small monthly transfers from the Mansfield account, made the case in plain English. Monique, March 8, 2023. There's plenty in the account. Don't worry about it, it's fine. Sister, March 8, 2023. Where is this coming from? Monique, March 8, 2023. Side work I picked up at the county. Don't ask, just take it. Monique Denise Holloway was confronted on February 11, 2025. She had just finished a 14-hour shift, the back end of an ice storm that had blanketed the county overnight, when two investigators from the Auditor of State's office met her in the parking lot of the Public Safety Building. The morning was 23 degrees. There was salt on the pavement. Investigator: Mrs. Holloway, we'd like to speak with you about Lakeside Comm Solutions. Monique stopped at her car door. The keys were already in her hand. Her shoulders did not move. She turned slowly and looked at the investigator over the roof of the Lincoln. Holloway: I don't know what you're referring to. Investigator: Lakeside Comm Solutions, ma'am. The vendor at 1817 West Liberty Street, Suite 218. Holloway: I approve a lot of vendors. I'd have to check my files. Investigator: We've been through the files. We've also been to Suite 218. We'd like to ask you about the mailbox. There was a pause that, according to the second investigator's notes, lasted somewhere between 9 and 12 seconds. Monique looked down at the salt on the pavement. Her right hand, the one holding the keys, was visibly shaking. The investigator wrote in the notes that her face did not change at all. Holloway: I'd like to call my attorney. Investigator: That's your right, ma'am. We have a warrant to seize your work computer, your purchasing card, and any county documents in your possession. We are not arresting you today. Holloway: I understand. Those were the last words she would say to anyone from the auditor's office without counsel present. She handed over the key card, the purchasing card, and a county-issued laptop from the passenger seat of her car. She did not return to the building. She drove herself home in the Lincoln Nautilus the credit union account had paid for. She would never work another shift in emergency services. The indictment was returned by a Fulton County grand jury on April 22, 2025. The case was filed in the Fulton County Court of Common Pleas, Judge Helena Marsh presiding. The charges, all illustrative under Ohio statute, included theft in office under Ohio Revised Code, Section 2921. 41. Tampering with records under Section 2913. 42. And telecommunications fraud. There were 48 counts in total. The state was represented by Assistant County Prosecutor Trevor Halsey. Monique was represented by a Columbus-based defense attorney named Felicia Granger. Granger filed 2 motions to suppress and 1 motion to sever the counts. Judge Marsh denied all 3 in a written opinion issued on October 14, 2025. The opinion ran to 22 pages and concluded with a single sentence the local paper would quote in its coverage. The defendant's authority over the fund did not relieve her of accountability to it. It created that accountability. In November of 2025, Granger approached the prosecutor with a plea offer. The state countered. The final agreement was signed on January 13, 2026. Monique would plead guilty to 9 of the 48 counts in exchange for the dismissal of the remaining 39. She would pay full restitution. She would be permanently barred from public employment in the state of Ohio. The state would recommend a sentence within the range of 24 to 36 months in state prison. Sentencing was held on April 9, 2026. The courtroom on the 3rd floor of the Fulton County Courthouse was full. 3 former dispatchers attended. 2 current ones did not. Patricia Bowen attended. Garrett Whitlock attended. The Director of Emergency Services, the man who had signed Monique's promotion letter in 2011, sat in the second row in a gray suit and did not speak to anyone. The victim impact statement was delivered by a retired dispatcher named Carl Whitney, who had worked the night console alongside Monique for 9 years. He read from 3 handwritten pages. The line that the local paper printed in full the next morning read as follows: She knew that fund. She knew what it was for. She knew there would be a night when a tornado came back through this county the way it did in 1987, and the radios we needed would not be there because she had spent them on a beach in Hilton Head. She did not care. That is what I cannot get past. She did not care. Judge Marsh's sentencing statement ran for nearly 4 minutes. She addressed Monique directly and did not look down at her notes. Judge Marsh: Mrs. Holloway, The position you held was not a position of paperwork. It was a position of trust over a fund created by this county in 1953, after the worst day in its history, so that no future generation would have to face such a day without resources. For 4 years you stole from that fund in amounts you yourself had set the threshold to disguise. You signed your own approvals. You reconciled your own thefts. You billed $250,000 to a metal mailbox. The court has read your sealed letter and notes your expression of remorse. The court is not persuaded that remorse arrived before the audit did. The sentence was 30 months in state prison, $250,000 in restitution, 3 years of post-release supervision, and a permanent bar from public employment in Ohio. Monique was remanded the same day. She is currently serving her sentence at the Ohio Reformatory for Women in Marysville, Security Level 2, with a projected release date of October 2028. Restitution payments are being garnished from the proceeds of the sale of her home on Eldridge Street, which closed in May of 2026. The Emergency Operations Discretionary Fund still exists. Its rules have been rewritten. A single supervisor signature is no longer sufficient for any amount above $5,000. The reconciliation is performed by an independent accounting firm. Patricia Bowen now sits on the Oversight Committee. Fulton County has had no major disaster since the audit closed. The fund, fully restored, is waiting for a day that has not yet come. This case was quiet, but the case on the right-hand side of your screen is the loudest one we have ever covered. Click it now.